Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 86 in the book of John. We're going to talk today about easing into the resurrection. Yesterday, we were surprised in Scripture, and we found the thing that was crazy was the loyal obedience of death to the Creator's command when Lazarus was raised from the dead. There was no real argument, and when God speaks authoritatively, death has to answer faithfully. So death was charged in the story of let him go, let Lazarus go. But the people in the story are charged with grab hold of him, that is Jesus, have faith. So we're in this series that he's asking us to do about belief in the resurrection. So he's going to start with Lazarus. That's kind of the beta version. Then in just a few days, he's going to be Jesus is going to be resurrected, and our whole faith, our whole Christianity relies on this. You can't be a Christian and not believe in the resurrection. It's the central core faith of all of them. And then the third thing is we apply the faith in Lazarus' resurrection and Jesus' resurrection, and then personally. 1 Corinthians 15:12 says, "Now if Christ is proclaimed as raised from the dead, how can some of you say that there is no resurrection of the dead? But if there is no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain and your faith is in vain." So he's telling you this is the core belief of Christianity. And then he goes on to say, hey, if that's true, if there's no resurrection, we are misrepresenting God, and we are to be the most pity people on the planet. All right, let's get to the real story. This is John chapter 11. Lazarus come out. The man who died came out. His hands and feet were bound with linen strips, and his face was wrapped with a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Then verse 45. Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation." So isn't it ironic that Jesus, who has death obey him, now faces rebellion, pushbacks from the chief priests, the Pharisees, and the gathered council? Now this council could have gone differently. They could have believed. But their motivation is betrayed in the story. They fear the Romans, that they will come and take away our place, which means their power, their position, and take away our nation. So what makes the nation of Israel? Well, it's a distinctive and unified belief set. Basically, it's the Old Testament. They're God's chosen people, Abraham, Moses, David. So what makes you a Jew and a Jewish nation is codified in this system of beliefs. Now, Jesus is definitely outside that box. He's outside of Jewish orthodoxy. So let's not throw the leaders too far under the bus. They want to keep their nation and their organization and their power. But they're going to forget a couple of things. The principles of church leadership that Jesus is going to teach us, which is you got to be a faithful person yourself. The primary job is to have a real faith, a real belief, and a life that's consistent with that belief. Those are all codified in the elder qualifications. And then secondly, the mechanism of church leadership is service. It's an upside down organization. It's not like this. It's like this, and it's served from the bottom. Power is not exerted from the top. Power is exerted from the bottom, and by service, by sacrifice, by humility. All right, let's talk about the crowd. The crowd that went with Mary to Jesus and then went to this meeting spot immediately to the tomb. And it says that many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what he did, believed in him. So a big question today is, if you saw Jesus raise somebody from the dead, would you believe it? And interesting, it says that many believe, but not all. Let's think about this podcast. We have a set of pretty highly motivated listeners, enough so that you've given me 7 minutes this morning. And I was wondering, what would the devotees of this podcast believe? So faith is believing in something that you don't yet see. But these guys got to believe after they saw it, after the words, after the odor, after hanging out with Lazarus and, living with him again. So what we are asking for is belief, but for us, I believe it's harder than these guys because we weren't there, we didn't directly see it, and we're relying on our author John and the big author God regarding an accurate inspiration and preservation and transmission and translation of the story from Greek. The other thing I want to point out is that the hoofbeats of crucifixion and death and and believe it or not, resurrection come right after this. So Jesus is in Bethany, right outside of Jerusalem, about 2 miles away. And when this story takes place, he never goes back home up to northern Israel. So shortly to follow this is the triumphal entry. It's almost next in Scripture. It's 2 or 3 paragraphs away. So we're on a fast track, ladies and gentlemen, to the Last Supper, the last teaching, the rest, the trials, the crucifixion, the suffering, death, and, wait for it, the resurrection. So the resurrection of Jesus is only like 8 or 9 days away in real time. The resurrection of Jesus is right around the corner. So I was going to say that no, if you don't believe in Lazarus's resurrection, you don't believe in Jesus. But I think that's too harsh. I settled on this, is I would say let's enjoy and revel and chew on the resurrection of Lazarus. And this will then make the resurrection of Jesus in just a little more than a week's time a little bit easier. The critical verse is, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. And he says to Martha, do you believe this? And she says, yes, Lord, I believe that you're the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's believe in the resurrection of Jesus. It's critical. But let's start with the resurrection of Lazarus. Thanks for listening.